An explosive geopolitical scandal is brewing in West Africa. Did the African Union and the United States secretly agree to remove Burkina Faso's revolutionary leader, Captain Ibrahim Traoré? And what role did U.S. General Michael Langley play in the shadows of this unfolding drama? This isn't just about one man. It's about Africa's independence, its future, and the foreign powers pulling the strings. Stay tuned as we break down leaked intel, insider reports, and what this could mean for the whole continent. In the heart of West Africa, a dangerous power play is unfolding. Captain Ibrahim Traoré, hailed as a hero by some and a threat by others, now finds himself at the center of an explosive international plot. The African Union, once silent, is allegedly aligning with U.S. General Langley to quietly remove the Burkinabe leader from power. What's really going on behind the scenes? And why now? Buckle up, the truth will shake you. The notion of a hidden war in Africa refers to the complex interplay of geopolitical, economic, and military struggles that often go underreported or misrepresented in global media. This war is not a single conflict, but a series of interconnected struggles involving resource control, foreign influence, and local resistance across the continent. In the context of Burkina Faso and Captain Ibrahim Traoré, it points to the ongoing battle for sovereignty, economic independence, and self-determination against external powers, primarily Western nations like France and the United States, but also emerging players like Russia and China. Africa's rich natural resources, including gold, uranium, oil, and rare earth minerals, have long made it a battleground for global powers. The Sahel region, where Burkina Faso is located, is particularly volatile due to its mineral wealth and strategic position. Since the early 20th century, colonial and neo-colonial powers have exploited African resources, often installing compliant governments to ensure access. The hidden aspect lies in how these interventions, through military presence, economic coercion, or covert operations, are framed as humanitarian or counterterrorism efforts, masking their true intent: control over resources and geopolitical dominance. In recent years, this dynamic has intensified in West Africa, particularly in the Sahel. The destabilization of Libya in 2011, led by NATO, unleashed a wave of jihadist violence across the region, providing a pretext for Western military presence, such as France's Operation Barkhane and the U.S. Africa Command, AFRICOM. However, local populations and leaders like Traoré have increasingly viewed these interventions as perpetuating insecurity rather than resolving it, fueling anti-imperialist sentiment. The hidden war thus encompasses not only physical conflicts, but also propaganda, economic sanctions, and covert attempts to undermine leaders who challenge Western hegemony. This war is also digital, with social media amplifying narratives of resistance and exposing foreign interference. The rise of Pan-Africanist leaders like Traoré, who reject Western dominance, has galvanized a continent-wide movement, particularly among youth frustrated by poverty amidst resource wealth. The hidden war is, therefore, a struggle for narrative control, sovereignty, and the right to self-determination in a region long manipulated by external forces. Who is Captain Ibrahim Traoré? Captain Ibrahim Traoré burst onto the political scene in 2022, overthrowing Burkina Faso's military ruler Paul-Henri Sandaogo Damiba. At just 34 years old, Traoré became the world's youngest head of state, vowing to root out terrorism and restore dignity to his people. His message was simple: Burkina Faso belongs to Burkinabes, not to foreign interests. But what began as a patriotic revolution has now placed him in the crosshairs of powerful global actors. Captain Ibrahim Traoré, born on March 14, 1988, in Kara, Bondakwi, Burkina Faso, is the interim president of Burkina Faso, having seized power in a coup on September 30, 2022. At 37, he is the world's second youngest head of state, embodying a new generation of African leadership. A military officer with a background in geology, Traoré's rise to power and his anti-imperialist stance have made him a polarizing yet widely celebrated figure across Africa and its diaspora. Early life and military career. Traoré grew up in a modest family, attending primary school in Bondakwi and secondary school in Bobo Dioulasso, where he was described as quiet but talented. He studied geology at the University of Ouagadougou before joining the Burkinabe Army in 2010. His military career included frontline experience against jihadist groups in northern Burkina Faso and service in the United Nations peacekeeping mission in Mali, where he was cited for courage in 2018. Promoted to captain in 2020, Traoré became disillusioned with Burkina Faso's leadership, witnessing soldiers' lack of equipment and rampant corruption among politicians. Rise to power. In January 2022, Traoré supported a coup led by Lieutenant Colonel Paul-Henri Sandaogo Damiba against President Roch-Marc Kabore, who was seen as failing to address the jihadist insurgency plaguing Burkina Faso since 2015. However, dissatisfaction with Damiba's leadership, particularly his inability to curb insecurity and perceived alignment with Western interests, led Traoré to orchestrate a second coup in September 2022. Backed by the Cobra unit, he ousted Damiba and assumed the role of interim president, promising to restore security and sovereignty. Leadership and ideology. Traoré has positioned himself as a Pan-Africanist and anti-imperialist, drawing inspiration from Burkina Faso's revolutionary icon Thomas Sankara, who was assassinated in 1987. His policies focus on economic self-reliance, including nationalizing gold mines, halting unrefined gold gold exports to Europe and building a domestic gold refinery. He has expelled French troops, ended military cooperation with France, and deepened ties with Russia, notably through the Wagner Group and other non-Western partners like Iran. Traoré's rhetoric emphasizes African dignity, rejecting foreign interference and advocating for the Alliance of Sahel States, AES, a regional bloc with Mali and Niger to counter Western-backed organizations like ECOWAS. Public image. Traoré's charisma, modest lifestyle, he reportedly forgoes a presidential salary, and bold actions, such as appearing armed at public events, have fueled a cult of personality. Social media, amplified by AI-generated content and viral videos, portrays him as a modern Sankara, resonating with African youth frustrated by neo-colonialism. However, his authoritarian measures, including crackdowns on dissent and forced conscription of critics, raise concerns about democratic backsliding. Despite these controversies, Traoré's commitment to resource sovereignty and anti-Western stance has made him a symbol of resistance, earning him widespread admiration across Africa and beyond. African Union's shift in loyalty. For months, the African Union, AU, stood largely silent on Burkina Faso's situation. While ECOWAS sanctioned other juntas like Mali and Niger, Traoré's regime was met with caution. That changed after Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger formed the Alliance of Sahel States, AES, a clear rejection of AU authority. Sources now say top AU officials fear this alliance could unravel regional influence. And now, according to leaks, AU diplomats have been holding private talks with U.S. representatives on restoring constitutional order. The African Union, AU, established in 2002 to promote unity and development across the continent, has traditionally been seen as a platform for African governments to align with global powers, particularly Western ones, due to economic dependencies and historical ties. However, recent developments, including Traoré's rise and the formation of the Alliance of Sahel States, AES, suggest a potential shift in the AU's dynamics, though not necessarily a unified shift in loyalty. Context of the AU's role. The AU has often balanced promoting African sovereignty with maintaining diplomatic relations with global powers. It has supported initiatives like the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, which has historically been influenced by Western interests, particularly France and the U.S. The AU's response to coups in West Africa, including Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, has been cautious, often condemning military takeovers and imposing sanctions to pressure juntas toward democratic transitions. However, the AU's effectiveness is limited by its reliance on funding from Western donors and the diverse interests of its 54 member states. The Alliance of Sahel States and Regional Defiance. The formation of the AES by Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger in 2023 marks a significant challenge to the AU's authority and its Western-aligned frameworks. These countries, led by military juntas including Traoré's, withdrew from ECOWAS, citing its subservience to foreign powers, particularly after ECOWAS threatened military intervention in Niger following its 2023 coup. The AES aims to create a self-reliant security and economic bloc, rejecting Western military presence and aligning with Russia and other non-Western partners. This move reflects a broader trend of West African states prioritizing sovereignty over traditional alliances, challenging the AU's ability to enforce its democratic norms. AU's response to Traoré. The AU has not explicitly endorsed Traoré or the AES, maintaining its stance against unconstitutional changes of government. However, it has faced pressure to adapt to the growing anti-imperialist sentiment among African populations, particularly youth. The AU's 60-month transition plan for Burkina Faso, allowing Traoré to remain in power until at least 2029, suggests a pragmatic approach, acknowledging the popularity of leaders like Traoré while urging a return to civilian rule. This reflects a delicate balancing act. The AU must navigate its commitment to democracy while addressing the frustrations of member states and citizens who view Western influence as a barrier to development. Implications for loyalty. The AU's shift in loyalty is less about abandoning the West and more about responding to internal pressures for greater autonomy. Leaders like Traoré, by rejecting Western financial institutions like the IMF and World Bank, are pushing the AU to reconsider its reliance on external funding and influence. The rise of non-Western partnerships, particularly with Russia and China, further complicates the AU's position. While the AU remains a platform for dialogue, its loyalty is increasingly tested by a new generation of leaders and citizens demanding a break from neo-colonial structures. The organization's future will depend on its ability to mediate between these emerging blocs and traditional powers while maintaining its relevance. U.S. General Langley's role in Africa. General Michael Langley, commander of U.S. Africa Command, AFRICOM, has publicly emphasized counterterrorism support in the Sahel, but behind closed doors, his agenda may run deeper. Reports from whistleblowers suggest Langley met with African Union envoys to explore non-military options to dislodge Traoré, options that include economic strangulation, diplomatic isolation, and internal sabotage. AFRICOM denies these claims, but growing U.S. surveillance over Ouagadougou speaks volumes. General Michael Langley, as commander of U.S. Africa Command, AFRICOM, plays a pivotal role in advancing U.S. strategic interests in Africa. Appointed in 2022 as as the first black four-star general in the U.S. Marine Corps, Langley's tenure has coincided with heightened tensions in the Sahel, particularly over Burkina Faso and Traoré's leadership. AFRICOM's mission. AFRICOM, established in 2007, oversees U.S. military operations across Africa with a stated mission of countering terrorism, promoting stability, and protecting U.S. interests. With a $2 billion annual budget, it conducts operations like Flintlock, a multinational exercise aimed at enhancing African military's counter-terrorism capabilities. However, critics argue AFRICOM prioritizes securing access to resources, such as Burkina Faso's gold and Niger's uranium, over genuine security cooperation, often aligning with compliant governments to counter Russian and Chinese influence. Langley's controversial remarks. On April 3, 2025, during a U.S. Senate Armed Services Committee hearing, Langley accused Traoré of misusing Burkina Faso's gold reserves for personal security rather than national benefit. This statement, made without evidence, sparked outrage across Africa, with many viewing it as an attempt to delegitimize Traoré's leadership. The Burkinabe government condemned the remarks as regrettable and gravely inaccurate, while activists and Pan-Africanists labeled Langley a tool of Western imperialism. The timing of his comments, just before a reported coup attempt against Traoré on April 21, fueled suspicions of U.S. involvement in destabilization efforts. Langley's role in context. Langley's remarks reflect AFRICOM's broader strategy to counter the growing influence of Russia and China in Africa. He highlighted concerns about Chinese economic dominance and Russian exploitation of instability, particularly through the Wagner Group, which has supported Traoré's regime. His visit to Ivory Coast, a U.S. ally accused of sheltering coup plotters during Operation Flintlock, April 24 to 25, 2025, further heightened tensions, with protesters in Burkina Faso and beyond accusing the U.S. of orchestrating plots against Traoré. Criticism and backlash. Langley's comments were seen as part of a Western playbook to smear leaders who challenge foreign control, drawing comparisons to historical interventions against figures like Patrice Lumumba and Muammar Gaddafi. Social media campaigns, including hashtags like Hands Off Traoré, amplified African and diaspora voices accusing Langley of hypocrisy, given the U.S.'s history of resource exploitation and support for authoritarian regimes aligned with its interests. The backlash underscores a growing distrust of AFRICOM, viewed by many as a neo-colonial force rather than a partner in security. Impact on U.S.-Africa relations. Langley's role highlights the challenges facing U.S. policy in Africa. As countries like Burkina Faso pivot toward Russia and reject Western military presence, AFRICOM's influence is waning. Langley's public criticism of Traoré may have backfired, strengthening the latter's image as a resistance icon and exposing AFRICOM's limited leverage in a region increasingly skeptical of U.S. intentions. Evidence of the plot against Traoré. Allegations of plots against Traoré have surfaced repeatedly since his 2022 coup, with the most significant reported on April 21, 2025, when Burkina Faso's military government claimed to have foiled a major coup attempt aimed at sowing chaos and reversing Traoré's reforms. While concrete evidence is limited, the context and timing provide circumstantial support for these claims. Reported coup attempts. Since taking power, Traoré has faced multiple alleged coup plots, including one in September 2023. The April 2025 attempt, announced by the Burkinabe government, was described as a foreign-backed effort to destabilize the country. Intercepted communications reportedly revealed plans to overthrow Traoré, though specific perpetrators were not publicly named. The timing, shortly after Langley's Senate testimony accusing Traoré of corruption, fueled speculation of Western involvement, particularly from the U.S. and France. Circumstantial evidence. Langley's remarks. The AFRICOM commander's accusation on April 3, 2025, that Traoré was misusing gold reserves was seen as a pretext to justify intervention. Critics argue it mirrors historical Western tactics of demonizing leaders before orchestrating their removal, as seen with Gaddafi in Libya. Ivory Coast's role. Burkina Faso has accused Ivory Coast, a U.S. and French ally, of sheltering coup plotters. Langley's visit to Ivory Coast during Operation Flintlock, April 24 to 25, 2025, coincided with heightened tensions, lending credence to claims of regional collaboration against Traoré. Western interests. Traoré's nationalization of gold mines and expulsion of French troops threaten Western access to Burkina Faso's resources. The U.S. and France have historically supported regime change against leaders who challenge their interests, such as Lumumba in 1961 and Sankara in 1987. Social media and protests. The global outcry following Langley's comments, including rallies in Ouagadougou, Ghana, Liberia, and London on April 30, 2025, reflects widespread belief in a Western plot. Posts on X and other platforms amplified these sentiments, with users citing historical precedents of CIA and French-backed coups. Lack of concrete evidence. While the Burkinabe government's claims and public sentiment suggest foreign involvement, no definitive evidence, such as declassified documents or confessions, has been made public. The opacity of military regimes and the polarized nature of social media narratives complicate verification. Some analysts argue that Traoré's government may exaggerate coup threats to justify crackdowns on dissent and bolster his revolutionary image. Implications. The perception of a plot, whether substantiated or not, has strengthened Traoré's legitimacy among supporters, who view him as a target of imperialist aggression. It has also fueled anti-Western sentiment, with the AES positioning itself as a bulwark against foreign interference. Without clear evidence, however, the narrative remains a powerful tool for both Traoré's regime and his critics. West Africa's resistance to foreign control. West Africa's resistance to foreign control is a defining feature of the region's recent political landscape, driven by frustration with neocolonialism, resource exploitation, and ineffective Western interventions. Traoré's Burkina Faso, alongside Mali and Niger, exemplifies this trend through bold actions to reclaim sovereignty. Historical context. Since independence in the 1960s, West African nations have struggled with neo-colonial structures, such as France's Francafrique policy, which maintained economic and military dominance over former colonies. The CFA franc, a currency tied to the euro and controlled by France, has been criticized for limiting economic autonomy. Western military operations, like France's Operation Barkhane and U.S.-backed counterterrorism efforts, have often exacerbated insecurity, with local soldiers and civilians bearing the brunt of violence. Key developments. Expulsion of foreign troops. Burkina Faso 2023, Mali 2022, and Niger 2023 expelled French and U.S. forces, accusing them of failing to curb jihadist insurgencies and exploiting local resources. Traoré's ultimatum to French troops in January 2023 symbolized this break from Western military dependence. Alliance of Sahel States (AES) formed by Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger. The AES rejects Western-aligned blocs like ECOWAS and prioritizes regional security and economic cooperation. It has deepened ties with Russia, which provides military support through the Wagner Group and other non-Western partners. Resource nationalism. Traoré's nationalization of gold mines and construction of a domestic refinery reflect a broader push to control natural resources. Similar moves in Mali and Niger aim to redirect wealth from foreign corporations to local development. Rejection of Western institutions. Traoré's refusal of IMF and World Bank assistance signals a desire to break free from conditional loans that often impose austerity and foreign oversight. This stance resonates with youth, who view these institutions as tools of neo-colonialism. Public sentiment. The resistance is fueled by a young, urban population. Africa's median age is 19, frustrated by poverty, unemployment, and foreign exploitation. Social media has amplified anti-Western narratives, with figures like Traoré celebrated as heroes of sovereignty. Rallies across West Africa, such as those on April 30, 2025, in support of Traoré, demonstrate widespread support for this movement. Challenges. While popular, this resistance faces significant hurdles. Security. The jihadist insurgency remains a threat, with Traoré's promise to restore stability unfulfilled, raising questions about the AES's effectiveness. Economic dependence. Despite rejecting Western aid, West African economies rely on global markets, and new partnerships with Russia and China may replicate old dependencies. Authoritarianism. Military juntas, including Traoré's, have suppressed dissent, raising concerns about long-term governance and human rights. Significance. West Africa's resistance signals a shift toward self-determination, challenging the post-colonial order. It has inspired other nations to reconsider foreign partnerships and prioritize local control, potentially reshaping regional dynamics. Traoré's growing popularity versus global pressure. Traoré's popularity, both domestically and across Africa, stems from his anti-imperialist rhetoric, bold reforms, and alignment with Pan-African ideals. However, this has drawn significant global pressure from Western powers and their allies, creating a tense standoff. Sources of popularity. Anti-imperialist stance. Traoré's expulsion of French troops, rejection of Western financial institutions, and alignment with Russia resonate with Africans tired of foreign dominance. His speeches, such as his April 1, 2025, warning against those blocking Burkina Faso's development, inspire youth seeking sovereignty. Economic reforms. Nationalizing gold mines, building a refinery, and investing in agriculture, e.g., 400 tractors, 68,964 tons of fertilizer, demonstrate a commitment to self-reliance, earning him admiration as a leader prioritizing local needs. Digital presence. Social media, amplified by AI-generated content like deepfake videos, has globalized Traoré's image as a revolutionary. Viral TikTok and X posts portray him as a modern Sankara, resonating with a global African diaspora. Youth appeal. At 37, Traoré connects with Africa's young population, who see him as a break from aging, corrupt leaders. His modest lifestyle and military attire enhance his image as a relatable, principled figure. Global pressure. Western criticism. The U.S. and France view Traoré as a threat to their interests, particularly his pivot to Russia and nationalization policies. Langley's April 2025 remarks and France's accusations of Russian-backed coups reflect efforts to undermine him. Sanctions and isolation. ECOWAS's sanctions on Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger aim to pressure juntas toward democracy, but have strengthened their resolve to form the AES and seek non-Western alliances. Coup allegations. The reported April 2025 coup attempt, coupled with accusations against Ivory Coast, suggests Western-backed efforts to destabilize Traoré's regime, though evidence remains inconclusive. Media narratives. Western media often portray Traoré as an authoritarian destabilizer, contrasting with his heroic image in African media and social platforms. Balancing act. Traoré's popularity gives him leverage to rally domestic and regional support, but global pressure threatens his regime's stability. His reliance on Russian support risks replacing one form of dependency with another, while his authoritarian measures, such as jailing critics, could erode his domestic base if security and economic gains falter. What this means for Africa's future. Traoré's leadership and the broader resistance in West Africa have profound implications for the continent's future, signaling a potential shift in governance, geopolitics, and economic models. Resource sovereignty. Traoré's nationalization policies could inspire other African nations to reclaim control over resources, challenging exploitative mining agreements. If successful, Burkina Faso's gold refinery and agricultural investments could model self-reliant development, reducing dependence on foreign corporations. However, mismanagement or corruption, common in state-owned enterprises, could undermine these gains. Geopolitical realignment. The AES's alignment with Russia and China reflects a broader trend of African nations diversifying partnerships. This could weaken Western influence but risks new dependencies. The AU and ECOWAS may need to adapt to these shifts, balancing democratic ideals with the demand for sovereignty. Youth and Pan-Africanism. Traoré's appeal to Africa's youth, amplified by social media, is revitalizing Pan-Africanism. This could pressure older leaders to address generational frustrations, potentially leading to more dynamic governance. However, the cult of personality around Traoré risks overshadowing policy substance, and his authoritarian tactics could alienate supporters if democratic transitions stall. Security challenges. The ongoing jihadist insurgency remains a critical test. If Traoré and the AES fail to restore stability, their anti-Western stance may lose credibility, opening the door for renewed foreign intervention. Conversely, success could validate their model of independent security. Long-term prospects. Africa's future hinges on whether leaders like Traoré can translate rhetoric into tangible development. Economic growth projections, such as Burkina Faso's potential 8% annual growth to 2043, suggest opportunity, but political instability and external pressures could derail progress. The continent may see a new era of assertive governance, but only if leaders prioritize accountability and inclusive development. Final thoughts and what comes next. Burkina Faso is no longer just a national story. It's the front line of a global struggle. As African nations demand independence, foreign powers scramble to retain influence. The plot to remove Traoré, if real, could fracture the African Union, deepen global divides, and spark resistance across the continent. One question remains: is Traoré Africa's last hope for sovereignty or a ticking time bomb? Traoré's rise marks a pivotal moment in Africa's struggle for sovereignty, reflecting a broader awakening against neo-colonialism. His leadership, while inspiring, is fraught with risks, security challenges, authoritarianism, and the potential for new dependencies. The hidden war in Africa is becoming increasingly visible, driven by digital activism and leaders who challenge the status quo. What comes next? Burkina Faso's transition. Traoré's extended mandate until 2029 will test his ability to deliver on security and economic promises. Failure could erode his popularity, while success could solidify his legacy. Regional dynamics. The AES's growth or fragmentation will shape West Africa's geopolitical landscape. Other nations may join or emulate the bloc, challenging Western dominance. Global response. Western powers may escalate efforts to counter Traoré through sanctions, propaganda, or covert actions, while Russia and China expand their influence. Youth mobilization. Africa's youth will continue to drive change, using digital platforms to amplify Pan-Africanist ideals. Their support will be crucial for leaders like Traoré, but also a check on authoritarianism. In conclusion, the hidden war is a battle for Africa's soul, its resources, identity, and future. Traoré's story is a microcosm of this struggle, embodying both hope and peril. Africa's path forward depends on balancing revolutionary zeal with pragmatic governance, ensuring that the fight for sovereignty delivers lasting prosperity.